And to me, this is very good. And I go to the campuses a lot of times. And still, since the campaign's been over, I visit a lot of campuses. That's where I get enthusiastic, because the young people are receptive to this. And they come by my office. It used to be parents would bring a teenager by my office, sort of drag them along. Today, young people bring their parents along and say, listen, I'm listening to this guy. But when they come in, I ask them questions. I want to know, what the situation is, who's interested and why. And I asked the young person, I said, what was it, how did you get interested? And most of the time it was either a YouTube video or the campaign or whatever, or read something. And I said, what's the issue that you care about? And they'll say, the two that come out on top is, one, they say, I like what you say about the Constitution. And these are teenagers. And then, interestingly enough, which is really fascinating to me, is that they say, I like your concerns about and your explanation about the Federal Reserve System. I think that's where we have made our greatest progress here in the last couple of years. If we have to key in on a particular issue to try to get the attention of the large number of people outside of those of you who are activists, it has been the attention that we have drawn toward the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, in many ways, is the culprit that creates the bubble, creates the downturn, creates the recessions, creates the inflation, the unemployment, and they've been totally ignored for all these years. They've gotten away with it. Today, if you take a poll across the country on all of us, we find out that 80% of the American people say that we ought to audit the Federal Reserve. Which reminds me when the first time I heard that. Up at a very liberal university, up at the University of Michigan, young people waited a good while after we had a debate in Detroit, came over there, and they spontaneously started talking about ending the Fed and burning Federal Reserve notes. So, no, that's to me is very exciting that young people have this interest. And rightfully so. Why shouldn't they be interested? They're at 18, 20, 21. They're getting finished college. I bet you they owe a little bit of money. They need a job. They're worried about the job. And what are we giving them? Are we giving them their freedom, a guarantee of their freedom and prosperity? No, we're giving them a bunch of debt, lousy money, and a lot of uncertainties out there. So they have responded to the message of liberty, the message of limited government, balanced budgets, frugal government. And to me, this is very, very positive. If we're going to see a change in this country, it will have to involve the young people. They have to be energized. And to me, this is a good sign. I talk a lot about economic policy. I talk a lot about foreign policy and balanced budgets and sound money. And, of course, the Constitution, because the Constitution is what we take our oath to obey. But I do believe that there's one issue slightly above the Constitution itself, because the Constitution is written for one sole purpose, the way I understand what the founders wanted. And that, to me, is the understanding and the need for preservation of individual liberty. If we have a country that understands what individual liberty is all about, you don't need a lot of other words. The amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, these are all very, very important. But if you have a true understanding of liberty, everything falls into place. It starts with our life. Our life is our own. It is a life given to us by our God. And we have a right to our life and a responsibility to manage that life properly. Therefore, if we have a right to our life and that responsibility, we therefore have a right to our liberty. And the liberty comes as that same right. It does not come from government. It comes from our Creator. Now, if we have a right to our life and a right to our liberty, it comes to us in a natural, God-given way, and the governments are there to be very limited in protecting that right. Why would it not be logical for us to assume that when we put out our energy and our effort to take care of ourselves and our family and be productive and be creative, that we don't have the right to the fruits of our labor? And because we have too many in Washington that think rights come from government, they don't believe that the fruits of your labor belong to you. They believe they belong to government. And too often, even individuals on our side, conservative Republicans, will get careless and talk about, paying for a tax deduction or something like this. What is important is that if the government gives a tax cut, it isn't a cost to government. It's just returning what belongs to you. And yet they continuously say, if it is a cost to government, that means the government owns your life, and in many ways they do. They regulate us to death. They own everything you earn, and they permit you to keep a certain percentage. This is why the income tax, the personal income tax, is probably at least one of the very worst types of income tax, because it's based on the assumption that the government owns every penny what you earn, and they permit you to keep a certain amount. This is why the true cause of liberty and principled government would be no income tax on the person. During one of the debates, this subject came up, and we had already discussed the income tax, and I think the question was something like, what is the next worst tax? And other people would say, well, the inheritance tax or sales tax or something like that. And I said, no, the really bad tax that's almost equivalent to the income tax is the inflation tax. This whole idea that we, the people in this country, for almost 100 years, delivered permission to a secret organization to create money out of thin air and subsidize and finance big government. That comes back to us because as the value of the dollar goes down and you go and pay higher prices for your products, that is a tax, and it's a regressive tax. It wipes out the middle class and the poor a lot faster than it will ever wipe out Wall Street, and that is why it's such a sinister tax.